guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about John Crist's big oopsie daisy. November of 2019, John Crist had a big media scandal. A bunch of ladies came out and said he bribed us with fancy tickets to his shows so that he could sexually molest us. Sexually harassing your fans is a good way to put your Christian comedy career on hold. I thought his videos were really funny, and I was very disappointed when he turned out to be a total creep. A couple of weeks ago, he announced his big apology video, and as excited as I was to see it, I'm like, hey, yay, we're finally apologizing. There was a part of me that was afraid that he was gonna go back to making content. It had only been 8 months, and to me, that doesn't seem like quite enough time to fully heal and recover and continue to make the same kind of content that you did before. The apology video that he released, which I will post a link to, was kind of lame.
What's up, everybody? John Crist here. Hi. It has been over 8 months since I posted anything on the internet, and for a guy who used to post content literally every single day, that has felt like forever.
In my personal opinion. He didn't seem to take very much accountability, and he didn't seem very sincere. And the content that, sure enough, did pop up on his feed a couple of days later kind of validated all of my feelings. I had a feeling that he wasn't truly repentant, and the content that he posted pretty much proved me right, unfortunately. So how do you do it right? What makes a good apology? When you screw up on the massive scale that John Crist did, how do you make things right with the people you've hurt? As Christians, we're called to forgive. But I think we have to be very careful with how we trust people. Just because you've forgiven someone doesn't mean that they get to resume the same kind of relationship that you had previously. Trust has been broken. It's this idea of you need to forgive and completely forget that I think leads a lot of victims to being manipulated and hurt over and over and over again. We're called to forgive, but we're not called to be dumb. So let's talk about the 3 things that every good apology needs. And does John Crist's apology meet the criteria? Number 1 is true repentance, and in that means accountability. You have to openly admit that you've done a terrible, terrible wrong thing and that people have been hurt by you. Something really concerning is that if you look at John Crist's first statement that he released back in November, which given was right when the scandal began, so everything was really raw, one of the first things he says is that most of the allegations aren't true. Before he takes accountability for the things that he did do, he first wants to dismiss a lot of them that he believes are false. Starting out your apology with, "That's not true, but," is a good way to sound really insincere. John Crist does say he hurt people, but the amount of time that he spends in his apology taking ownership for the sins that he's committed, the people that he's hurt, is really short. He actually spends more time thanking his fans for taking him back than he does for apologizing to the people he's hurt.
First and foremost, thank you for all the love and care and support that you guys have shown me. Has meant the world. I don't know how else to say it.
Which I find a little offensive. If I was personally victimized by John Crist and he releases a video that's basically, hey, sorry I haven't been posting for a little while, I would be pretty offended. Like, oh, you're not sorry that you sexually harassed me, but you're sorry you haven't been posting for a while? Kind of insulting. The second thing that makes a good apology is time. You can't necessarily just go back to your old ways immediately. People need time to heal, and so do you. John Crist took an 8-month break from his comedy career and from social media. Maybe he has made huge strides in these 8 months, but let's be real, 8 months is not long enough for a victim to heal. That's for sure. The third thing that makes a good apology is evidence of a changed life. If you're truly repentant, if you've truly taken ownership for your problems, for your sin, if you've truly given it time to heal, there should be fruit in your life that you are not the same person anymore. If you're gonna work towards gaining someone's trust, they need to feel confident that you're not gonna do the things that you did in the past, especially since it sounds like John Crist hurt his fans over a period of years. One of the reasons I think the John Crist apology is kind of lacking is because of the content that he released just a few days after his apology video. So if you used to watch John Crist videos, they were like little skit videos, kind of TikTok-y style, where he would go through a grocery store and pull items off a shelf and make puns off the items. Like, oh, I'm a single Christian girl at Valentine's Day. I'm gonna pull things off the shelf and make a pun on the item. And that was kind of his shtick. They were funny. He goes back and makes the same style, which is fine. And the theme is cancel culture, which seems kind of political to be your very first video that you release after a time of social media exile. Cancel culture is a weird topic because on the one hand, cancel culture is kind of this word that we use to describe people digging up the past from years and years ago. It can be taken to an extreme where the problem that used to be doesn't exist anymore and people are easily offended. However, cancel culture is sometimes a word that people use to describe any kind of criticism of a product or a person. For example, a year or two ago, James Charles got canceled when it was revealed that he did nearly the same exact thing as John Crist. James Charles was using his platform and influence to prey upon young male fans or young boys in his circle of influence and was manipulating them in the same way John Crist did that to his female fans. I think it's perfectly justified to kind of encourage people not to watch James Charles videos so that he doesn't have that platform, so that he doesn't have that opportunity to do those bad things to people anymore. Plus, it feels icky to watch someone and be a fan of someone who you know does those despicable things. So John Crist's first video is about cancel culture, and in it he's making fun of people who are hyper offended, and he's pulling the items off the shelf and pretending that they're offending him. And one of the things he does is kind of make a jab at people who are criticizing him.
Orville Redenbacher, look at this guy. He definitely made some mistakes in his past. Do you want to cancel him? We can if we want. I'll look up some mistakes that he made in his past.
He's basically mocking anyone that criticizes him or says that he shouldn't have a platform anymore, which I think kind of seems like someone who hasn't changed very much. I know I'm kind of making jokes in this video, but this is so serious. People do this all the time in the church and in the Christian celebrity world. I think it's really unfair to the victims that John Crist hurt to so enthusiastically welcome him back into the limelight. By all means, forgive John Crist. By all means, pray for him, maybe welcome him back onto social media, but I don't think that we should be celebrating his return into making content again and being a comedian again, where he's gonna have an audience, where he hasn't really shown a whole lot of fruit yet of a real repentant heart. There hasn't been a lot of time, and there sure hasn't been a lot of evidence of change. Like, time will tell if he really is different, and we should give him that opportunity, but so far he's only shown the opposite. So I want to provide an example of an apology that I think is actually really amazing. A Christian or former Christian celebrity who made a big oopsie and then apologized in a way that I see as much more sincere. So if you follow my channel, you know that I'm a big Christian metalhead. And so today we're gonna be talking about As I Lay Dying's Tim Lambesis. As I Lay Dying was a Christian metal band, but a few years ago, Tim struggled with mental illness, had a crisis of faith, and came out that he was not a Christian anymore. Several members of the band still are, but Tim Lambesis is no longer. Like John, Tim also struggled with mental illness, and the fame got to his head. Another thing that he struggled with was addictions, just like John, except instead of sex addiction, it was steroids. There's actually a lot of parallels, I think, between John Crist and Tim Lambesis. Just keep tracking with me for a while. Tim's big oopsie was a little different though. Tim was having a lot of marital problems, and one day he decides to order a hit on his wife. That's right, he calls up an assassin, or who he believes is an assassin, was actually an undercover police officer, and asks him to kill his wife. He gets arrested, he gets thrown in prison, and as you can imagine, marriage over. His bandmates were devastated. The fans were devastated. The band fell apart. All of his old bandmates started a new band with Shane Blayovo's Sleeper, and they made Woven War, which is a great band. But anyway, Tim spent years in prison. He was released about 2 years ago, and the apology that he made was really, really impactful. Listen to some of this.
I hurt every single person in my life. People who loved me, people who cared for me, people who knew me and spent substantial parts of their lives with me. I hurt many of them to a devastating degree. At the very least, my behavior incited anger and disappointment. On the other hand, it put fear and helplessness in the hearts of people who were innocent and blameless. I went to prison on a charge of solicitation of another to commit murder. It was the end of a dark, ruinous path I chose to walk down for far too long. Putting good people through pain and misery is a monumental regret I will carry for the rest of my life. I wish every day I could take it back.
One of the things that stands out to me is how much accountability he takes. The very first words out of his mouth are, "I hurt everyone in my life." Remember the first one? Repentance. We have full repentance. There's no blame shifting. There's no, "Hey, it was an accident. I'm so embarrassed." There's none of that. Full accountability. The other thing is time. We know Tim spent years in jail. Tim had time to sit in his cell and reflect on the things that he's done. It wasn't 8 months in a treatment center. It wasn't 8 months getting therapy. Tim spent years in prison. He suffered the consequences of his actions. He was at risk of losing his band, his friends, his family. He already lost his marriage. He suffered greatly, and now he had time to reflect on all of it. Third part of that, remember we talked about the evidence of a changed life? Let's see what his bandmates have to say about the new Tim.
I believe we learned the profound value of what forgiveness can do for oneself.
None of us were expecting Tim to completely and publicly take ownership of his past. We had seen prior behavior where he attempted to excuse his actions and place blame on other people, substances, or circumstances. I think for all of us, it created a sort of trepidation towards what he might do or say after being released. That there would be this threat of him abusing a public platform to sell his side of the story in a way that was untruthful. So when we were made aware of his release, we initially resisted his efforts to formally apologize, as we wanted to see what he did, not just what he said. We needed to see examples of a changed human being, someone who recognized, acknowledged, and expressed deep remorse for who they were and what they had done. And over time, that's who he had shown himself to be. We saw these changes through his work in the recovery community and proactivity in prison outreach. He also respectfully utilized the reach of our band's platform to not just say he was truly and deeply sorry, but to take responsibility for everything. Our expectations for all these years was for him to emerge from prison as a different version of his older self. Perhaps worse. But when we saw something positively unexpected, by way of deeds and behavior, it opened us all up to the notion that Tim may have made some substantial progress and change throughout his process of rehabilitation.
When you observe over time someone sincere in their efforts to make amends, pick themselves back up, and try to utilize the lessons they've learned to become a better person, it makes it easier to let go of the resentments you've been carrying from the past.
Something I love that they mention is that at first, Tim didn't have this kind of apology. He was defensive, he was angry at first, but after that time in prison, he truly was a changed man. He wanted to help people and counsel people. He was doing prison outreach and stuff with mental health. Tim was living a different life than the one that he was living before prison. They had their doubts at first, but when they realized he was demonstrating a changed life, they began to trust Tim again. I'm someone who believes that you can really tell a lot about a person's heart by the artwork that they produce. If you're an artist, your art is a good way to see what's in your brain. And just like we can tell so much about John Crist's Heart by John Crist comedy, I think you can tell a lot about Tim's heart by the song that he wrote immediately out of prison. The first single that he released after reforming As I Lay Dying was a song called My Own Grave. And I'll post a little bit of the lyrics and I'll post the words up if you're not used to listening to metal music and how loud and screamy it is, that way you can read it. The whole song is about how Tim has ruined his life and how it's all his fault. The entire album they released is just like that. It's filled with songs like Shaped by Fire, where Tim talks about how much his trials have changed who he is. Tim is a brand new person. I think there's a really good chance that he could find Christ again in all of this. As I Lay Dying was the last band I saw live before quarantine hit. I was hesitant at first because I felt kind of weird about going and seeing a Convict. But As I Lay Dying is my husband's favorite band, so I agreed. And I do like their music a lot. I was blown away about how much Tim talked about his struggles from the stage. A lot of times metal bands can spend a lot of their stage time cracking jokes or telling people to go buy their merch. Tim spent the entire time in between songs talking about mental health issues, about the charity that he was working with, and his merch table was dominated with pamphlets and resources for people struggling with mental health. I hadn't expected that from Tim, and I was really surprised. He seemed like a big sweetie pie. It was not what I expected at all. So I don't want to compare these two men's crimes, but I am going to compare their apologies. And I think when we look at the amount of repentance, the amount of time spent in reflection, and the evidence of a changed life, I think Tim is a better example of someone who has truly worked through their pain and is ready to be re-accepted into having an audience again, especially since the artwork he's making is now so different. John, I think, needs a little bit more time. And I'll tell you something really important. Both of these men can be completely redeemed. Both of these men can be totally restored, even though their crimes seem very crazy and very big. And you know why? Because there's a man in the Bible who is a lot like both of them. In the Old Testament, one of the biggest heroes of the Bible is King David. The Israelites loved King David. He's called a man after God's own heart. However, King David did a big oopsie. In fact, King David did both Tim's and John Crist's oopsies. Like John Crist, he lusted after the ladies and went so far as to harass one and steal them and take what wasn't his. In fact, some of his victims say that they were married. So John Crist was preying on married women, which is exactly what King David did with Bathsheba. And like Tim Lambesis, he was willing to arrange for someone's murder to get the life he wanted. And like I said, we're not going to compare the levels of these sins or these crimes. And since King David did them both, let's just talk about what he did. King David was not repentant at first. He did a series of horrible crimes. He abandoned his army and stayed home and was lazy. He went out on his balcony and was peeping at naked ladies. He was inquiring about them and found out that Bathsheba was married. He didn't care. He had her brought to him. He raped her, essentially. There's no saying no to the king. And impregnated her. When Uriah refused to come back from the war, he had him arranged to be killed. The reason David is a man after God's own heart has nothing to do with how moral his life was, because he made some huge moral lapses. There are very few crimes, very few sins I can think of that are bigger than murder and rape. And David did both. And John Crist and Tim did both. Essentially, King David actually succeeded at what both of these men attempted to do and kind of failed at. What makes King David a man after God's own heart is the fact that he repented fully and truly. He tears his clothes, he cries out to God, he does everything he can to make things right. Time goes by before his life goes back to normal. He loses the first son that he has with Bathsheba. And I would say there is evidence of a changed life because King David does not do that anymore. And like these two men, King David was an artist too. And we can see his heart in the Psalms that take place after the Bathsheba situation. And we realize how truly repentant and changed he is. So that's how to make a good apology. Make sure you say you're sorry for realsies, give it enough time, and then actually change your life. Definitely don't make fun of the people that might criticize you. That's gonna make you look like a really arrogant jerk. By the way, if you're like me and you love Christian comedy, but you kind of feel weird about watching John Crist videos anymore, let me give you some great suggestions. The first suggestion is Jaron Myers. Jaron Myers got famous for sneaking into his graduation and writing this hilarious rap about Chick-fil-A.
My name is Jaron. How can I help you today? Welcome to heaven. Ooh, yeah, I mean Chick-fil-A.
He does stand-up, he has a really strong social media presence, so you can follow him on Insta or Twitter or whatever your favorite platform is. He's hilarious, and if you really liked John Crist for his stand-up, Jaron Myers is even funnier. He's also super theologically spicy, so one of the reasons I like following him is because his Twitter is just, he's so bold. My other recommendation is an underrated gem. Taylor Ransom. If you like sketch comedy and you like that about John Crist, Taylor does it better.
Now, Josiah, this is not co-op. You do what you did last time, Adventures on Odyssey is gone for a week. No, I'll be good, I promise. Remember who you're representing. No, Braxton, I'm not allowed to watch Harry Potter. You know my mom thinks it's demonic.
His skits are hilarious, and along the same vein of John Crist, where he pretends to be church ladies or pretends to be tropes at church, Taylor does that, and he's hysterical. My recent favorite was when he was Edgy Kids at Youth Group.
Crap it! Son of a fucking Baptist! Heckin' flip, man!
Taylor's videos are amazing. Please check them out. They're hysterical. Also, he has a podcast called Frick Frack Podcast, which I love to listen to. It's low-key my dream to be invited on the Frick Frack Podcast. That's how you'll know that I made it. Taylor, be my friend. So go watch some good Christian comedy. Make sure your apologies are sincere. Go act like Jesus. I'll see you next time. Bye.